Hi, and welcome to this presentation on writing basics from Composition 1. To get started, one of the very basic things not listed in your textbook has to do with topic choice. And so here's a quick little pop quiz. True or false? Your best writing generally comes from the heart. That answer is true. One of the things that we'll be talking about this semester is topic choice, and research would suggest that your writing is generally the best, or you do your best writing, when you're talking about things that you're personally interested in, things that have personally happened to you, or if you're personally invested in a topic. So as we go through this semester, I would encourage you to choose topics that you really care about. Number 2, very few people can write well enough to be published. Some people can find personal, academic, and professional success. Now, to some of you, it's kind of a trick question, because you might agree that very few people can write well enough to be published. But actually, the answer to that question is that everybody can find personal, academic, and professional success, and even those people who don't feel like they write very well can always improve their skills. And so all of us can really become published writers with enough work and enough hard work and instruction. We can become better writers. Number 3, true or false, when writing, it's best to never write about things that are too personal. And again, this is just kind of an FYI. While this is true, if you refer to our first question, it's important to write about things from the heart. I just want to put this disclaimer out there that even if it is personal to you, you want to be careful that it's not too personal. And in thinking about that, you want to make sure that it's something that other people you're comfortable with someone else reading that, because we will do some peer revision. You'll be submitting that to me, and so if it's not something that you'd like other eyes knowing, you probably want to choose a different topic. This is also an opportunity for me to tell you that as a mandatory reporter, there are certain things that I am mandated to report, and so if those things, abuse of any kind of criminal activity, that you may want to be careful about those things, because as an instructor, I do have that responsibility to report those things. All right, now we get into the section of the presentation about why people write. And we all have different reasons for writing. You probably are thinking of a couple. Some people write because they have to. This is an assignment. They don't have much interest in writing otherwise. It's because they have to. But a couple of interesting things I think about writing. Number 1, a benefit of writing is that writing is thinking. It's going to develop your thinking skills. There's a lot of things going on when you're writing. You have to think about organization. You have to think about your main points. You have to think about how you're going to get those points across. And then you also have to think about your audience in terms of grammar. So how are they going to understand that? Where do I put the commas? Where do I put the periods? Where do I divide a paragraph? And so thinking is a big part of writing. Research would say that better writers equal better thinkers, and better thinkers maybe create better writers. But the more you write about a topic, the more you kind of flesh out what your thoughts are. And so through writing, you become a better thinker, because you're trying to figure out, the organization and where to put things. And you even figure out what you think about a topic sometimes through writing. The next is that writing is power, and maybe you've experienced this. I know I have a couple of times in my life. Writing is a means of communication, and it can be used in helpful ways or in very hurtful ways. And if you think about the helpful ways, there's all kinds. We can use kind words in spoken language. We can write letters of encouragement. We can write, in greeting cards. Those are all ways that writing can be very helpful. But writing can also be very hurtful. As we know, writing is something that doesn't go away. If it's put into a published word, or even if it's written as a note, those things are permanent. Social media, perhaps, that last question there, has made this even more powerful. And so you can kind of think about that. So has social media made writing more powerful? Sometimes things are put out there and they're out there. for a long time, forever in some cases. And so does that increase the power of writing, and do you have to be careful about what you say online? Writing also is a means of learning, very similar to thinking. A lot of instructors will use writing as a learning and teaching strategy. They may have you reflect on something before they begin a lecture or before you read something, because it's a good way to kind of prime the pump, as they say, to get your thoughts out. It also allows for deeper understanding. The more we can deal with content, whether that's writing about it, whether it's reading about it, the more times we can deal with content, the more likely it is that we're going to remember it. And so reading about it is one level, writing about it is another, doing it is a third level. So the more often we can work with content, the more likely it is that it will be remembered. 3 other very applicable practical reasons to write is that writing equals employment. For better or worse, those cover letters and resumes are used a lot of times as a method of weeding out candidates. And so jobs will require writing, most of them do. And so they see, your resumes and your cover letters as kind of the first step. And if you have a well-written cover letter, well-written resume, you're more likely probably to make it on to step 2. And then the second bullet underneath writing for employment is that, is it a value? Is it an evaluation of intelligence? Now, I know many, many instances where people are very intelligent, but maybe mess up punctuation or have a sentence in the wrong place. I don't think it's a fair evaluation of intelligence, but it is used sometimes as an evaluation of intelligence. And so keeping that in mind is important. Writing is also a way to make sense of life. A lot of people will use writing as a means of therapy, as a stress reliever. I'm going to highly encourage you to keep a journal. If you don't already keep a journal, consider that. Writing every day will not only improve your skills and improve your thinking, but it's also a neat way to kind of figure out what you were thinking when certain things happened, how you dealt with problems, how you make sense of the world. And so I encourage you to keep a daily journal, maybe writing 10 or 15 minutes every day. And hopefully for some of you, writing is a fun endeavor. It's something that you enjoy. And maybe if you don't enjoy it right now, maybe by the end of the semester, you might. All right, so moving on to part 2, and this was highlighted in your textbook, the writing process. A couple of things about the writing process. Most people have some kind of a process. Maybe it's not all of these pieces that we're going to talk about. Maybe it's just portions of what we're going to talk about, but it's a process nonetheless. Hopefully nobody out there is doing a first draft and done kind of thing. This class is going to kind of ask you to not write that way, and so it's going to maybe force some of you out of your comfort zone a little bit, because we're going to do the entire writing process. First thing to remember and to know is that the writing process is not a set of steps. You don't have to go through them in a specific order. More so, they're stages. And so you can bebop back and forth between the different stages. Most people will spend most of their time in the developing stage. That's where you're creating your drafts. And then a lot of times we'll go and we'll share. After we share, we may have to go back up into the developing stage so that we can fix whatever it was that people maybe didn't understand or where our communication was lost. Then we might go back to the sharing stage again, and then we might go back to developing, or we might skip right to the polishing. So as stages, we have the ability to kind of go where we want in the order that we wish to do so in the writing process. So a couple of the highlights. Brainstorming and pre-writing are kind of similar. It begins immediately. The minute we are introduced to a writing assignment, a lot of times our brain starts going to, okay, what can I write about? What experience do I have with this topic? We do plan for audience and purpose, which you'll see in the other presentation that's listed under this week. We go for quantity. We want to have as much listed as we can so that when we sit down to write, we're not stuck. We don't go, and start writing for a page or a page and a half and then stop when we need 5 pages of writing. writing from quantity and brainstorming from quantity is good because then we can weed out the stuff that doesn't fit or that won't help us to get our point across. The other great thing to know about brainstorming is that there are no rules. Anything goes. Don't let that inner critic kind of say, nope, that's a dumb idea, don't put it down. Put everything down that you think of because it may help in the long run. There are some kind of common ways that people brainstorm. We see the list. We see a free write where you just simply write whatever comes to mind. The outline is a more formal process, and then we see the cluster. And all of those three are pictured in your textbook, and we'll go through some of those as we continue throughout the semester. The second highlight of the writing process, the third stage after pre-writing and brainstorming, is actually the drafting. It's the writing of your paper. You worry only about getting the words on paper. Anne Lamott, who is a writer, has some great advice, and she says that we should all be writing shitty first drafts, meaning it should be yucky. That first draft, we should hope nobody ever sees it. It's just getting our thoughts down on paper. A lot of times we're worried about the critic, and so we don't put things down. We get stifled by wanting the perfect first draft. And Anne Lamott and many other famous authors or very professional authors will tell us that that's not the way to write. Just get it all out on paper and go back and fix later. There are different types of drafts, and those are outlined in your book. Nobody's rough draft should ever be their first and final draft. It should go through this drafting process, which we'll talk about in the next couple of slides. So once we have a rough draft, then we need to take a look at revising and editing. And really the big distinction between revising and revising is where we look at the big stuff. We look at rearranging, we look at adding, we look at deleting, expanding, strengthening. I'm a huge believer in checklists, and so you'll be getting plenty of checklists as we go through each paper. The editing that's for the audience generally. We do that so that they understand. We put commas in the right place so that our point is clearly made. We put periods so we know when sentences and thoughts are ending. And so editing really is for the audience. It's not for us because we know what we mean to say. It's so that the audience can read it and understand it. So editing, that's the little stuff. It's the grammar, the punctuation, the spelling, that type of thing. We will have opportunity for peer review this semester for most of our papers, for at least 3 of the 4. And peer review is a great process. It allows us to get feedback from an actual audience before we turn it in for a grade. And so as a peer reviewer, you will have the opportunity to comment on other people's papers about content, style, message, organization, and grammar, and then you'll have the opportunity as a writer to receive that feedback. And so it's a great way to improve your paper before it comes time for the final turn-in. That is the end of this slideshow. Hopefully you read your textbook because it will give you some additional information on things that maybe are not in here that you may be quizzed on in the quiz for this week. Have a great day.